I'm a search and rescue coordinator for the Cascade Mountain region, and what I found in the summer of 1996 still makes me question everything I thought I knew about the wilderness. My name is Robert Chen. I'm 47 years old now, and for 23 years, I've kept silent about what happened when we found Jeremy Holloway, or rather what Jeremy Holloway had become. But some stories demand to be told, and this is one of them. It was July 19th, 1996. The heat that summer was relentless, temperatures pushing into the high 90s, even at elevation. I was 31 years old back then, relatively new to my coordinator position, still eager to prove myself. My office was in a converted ranger station outside North Bend, Washington, where I managed a team of 15 trained search and rescue volunteers. We handled maybe 40 missions a year, most of them straightforward. Lost hikers who'd wandered off marked trails, injured climbers who needed evacuation, the occasional elderly person with dementia who'd walked away from a campground. The call came in at 6:47 in the morning. I remember because I'd just poured my second cup of coffee, the first one already cold and forgotten on my desk. The phone's ring cut through the quiet morning and I grabbed it on the second ring. "This is Chen. Robert, it's Sheriff Dawson. We've got a situation up near Lake Caches. Hiker called in about an hour ago, said he saw something unusual near the old Stampede Pass trail. Claims he saw what looked like a teenage boy, maybe 15 or 16 years old, completely naked, running through the forest with some kind of large animal." I set down my coffee mug. "Sheriff, you're calling search and rescue because someone saw a naked teenager?" "There's more." The hiker said the boy looked wild. Long hair, dirt-covered, moving on all fours part of the time. And the animal he was with, Robert, the guy swears it was walking upright, said it had to be 7, maybe 8 feet tall. My hand tightened on the receiver. "You're telling me someone saw a kid running around with a Bigfoot?" "I'm telling you what was reported." Sheriff Dawson's voice was carefully neutral. "The hiker's name is Mitchell Price. He's a retired geology professor from Seattle, up there doing field research. Not some drunk college kid or conspiracy theorist. He's camped at the ranger station right now, refuses to leave until someone investigates, says he's got photos. Photos of what? Of the boy, and possibly of the creature. He used a telephoto lens. Says he's been watching them for 3 days. I was quiet for a moment, processing. In 23 years of search and rescue work, I'd heard plenty of wild stories. People saw all kinds of things in the mountains when they were exhausted, dehydrated, or just scared. The human mind fills in blanks with imagination, but a geology professor with photos was different. "I'll assemble a team. Give me 2 hours. One more thing, Robert." Sheriff Dawson paused. "Run Jeremy Holloway through your database. Went missing in 1984. He was 7 years old. I pulled up our record system, typed in the name. The file loaded, and I felt my stomach drop. Jeremy Holloway, reported missing August 12, 1984, from a family camping trip near Keechelis Lake. Last seen playing near the campsite at approximately 4:30 in the afternoon. Massive search operation involving over 200 volunteers, search dogs, helicopters. The search lasted 11 days. No trace ever found. Case remained open but went cold after 6 months. That was 12 years ago, Sheriff. If this is the same kid, then he's been out there for 12 years. Dawson's voice was grim. And something's been keeping him alive. I hung up and immediately started making calls. I pulled together my best team, 6 people I'd trust with my life. Sarah Martinez, our best tracker, could read a trail like some people read books. Tom Whitfield, ex-Army medic, calm under pressure. Lisa Chen, no relation, wildlife biologist who knew these mountains better than anyone. James Rodriguez, our lead rope rescue specialist. And 2 others, David Park and Amanda Foster, both experienced wilderness first responders. By 9 in the morning, we were loading gear into 2 Toyota 4x4 trucks at the ranger station near Lake Caches. Professor Mitchell Price was there waiting, exactly as Sheriff Dawson had described. Mid-60s, silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, wearing sensible hiking clothes that had seen real use. He didn't look like someone prone to hallucinations. Professor Price, I'm Robert Chen, Search and Rescue Coordinator. I understand you've seen something unusual. He handed me a digital camera without preamble. I saw a boy, and I saw what he was with. I'm a scientist, Mr. Chen. I don't believe in cryptids or conspiracy theories, but I know what I saw, and I documented it. I turned on the camera and clicked through the images. My breath caught. The photos were taken from a distance, but the telephoto lens had captured remarkable detail. A figure definitely human, definitely young, moving through the forest. Long, dark hair, matted and wild. Lean, muscular body, deeply tanned and covered in dirt. And in 3 of the photos, another figure, massive, covered in dark reddish-brown hair, moving with a fluid grace that no bear possessed. Where exactly did you see them? I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. About 4 miles northeast of here, Professor Price pulled out a topographic map marked with careful annotations. I've been studying rock formations in this area for the past month. Set up my camp here, he pointed. 3 days ago, early morning, I heard vocalizations. Not quite human, not quite animal. I grabbed my binoculars and camera. That's when I saw them. What were they doing? The boy was foraging, digging roots, I think. The larger creature was nearby, watching, not like a predator watching prey, more like a parent watching a child. Professor Price met my eyes. Mr. Chen, I've spent 40 years studying geology in wilderness areas all over the world. I've seen bears, mountain lions, wolves. What I saw was neither bear nor any known primate. It walked upright with purpose. It communicated with the boy through sounds and gestures, and the boy responded. How do you know it's the missing Holloway boy? I don't for certain, but I looked up missing persons cases after the first sighting. The age would be right. The timing matches. And there's this. He clicked through the photos to one showing a closer view of the boy's face. See the left eyebrow? There's a distinctive scar running through it. I pulled up the missing person file on my phone. The photo of 7-year-old Jeremy Holloway showed the same scar, result of a childhood accident with a playground swing. My hands were shaking slightly as I handed the camera to Sarah Martinez. We need to approach this carefully, I said to my team. If this is Jeremy Holloway, he's been living in the wild for 12 years. He's not going to act like a normal teenager. He may not even remember language. He's likely to run, possibly to defend himself if he feels threatened. And the other one? Tom Whitfield asked quietly. What's our protocol if we encounter it? We observe and document, I said firmly. We don't engage unless there's an immediate threat to life. Our mission is to locate and potentially rescue Jeremy Holloway. Everything else is secondary. We hiked in 2 groups, following Professor Price's map coordinates. The terrain was dense with old-growth forest, western hemlock and Douglas fir rising like cathedral pillars around us. The underbrush was thick, requiring machetes in places. We moved slowly, quietly, stopping frequently to listen and observe. Sarah Martinez found the first sign after about 2 hours, footprints in the soft earth near a creek. She knelt beside them, her trained eyes analyzing every detail. Human prints, male, probably mid-teens based on size. Barefoot, and look at the wear pattern. These feet haven't seen shoes in years. The calluses would be incredible. And here, she pointed to a second set of prints beside the creek. These are larger, much larger, approximately 17 inches long, The weight distribution is bipedal, not quadrupedal like a bear. We followed the trail northeast, deeper into wilderness that saw maybe one hiker per year. The forest grew older, more primeval. The trees here had been standing for centuries, their massive trunks creating a canopy that filtered the sunlight into green-gold beams. At around 2 in the afternoon, James Rodriguez raised his hand, signaling everyone to freeze. He pointed ahead, through a gap in the trees, about 100 yards distant movement. I raised my binoculars. My heart hammered against my ribs. There, in a small clearing, was the boy from the photos. He was crouched beside a fallen log, using a stick to dig into the rotting wood, extracting grubs and larvae. He moved with the unconscious efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. His hair hung past his shoulders, dark and tangled. His body was lean and muscled in a way no modern teenagers would be, hardened by years of survival. And standing at the edge of the clearing, partially obscured by shadow, was something that made every rational part of my brain short-circuit. It stood at least 7.5 feet tall, covered in thick reddish-brown hair. The face was both human and utterly alien. Heavy brow ridge, broad, flat nose, strong jaw. It watched the boy with what could only be described as protective attention. The boy suddenly stiffened. His head snapped up, nostrils flaring. He'd caught our scent. In one fluid motion, he dropped to all fours and let out a sharp, high-pitched vocalization. The larger creature responded immediately, moving toward him with shocking speed, but not to flee, to protect. "Wait," I called softly to my team. "Don't move. Let them see we're not a threat." The boy and the creature stood together at the edge of the clearing. The creature's massive hand came to rest on the boy's shoulder, a gesture so clearly paternal it made my throat tight. The boy was looking directly at us now, his eyes wild and wary, but also intelligent, assessing, calculating. "Jeremy!" I called out, keeping my voice gentle. "Jeremy Holloway, we're here to help. We're not going to hurt you." The boy's head tilted at the sound of his name. Something flickered in his expression, confusion maybe, or the ghost of memory. But when he opened his mouth, what came out wasn't English. It was a series of grunts and clicks, almost like language, but not quite. He was speaking to the creature. The creature responded with its own vocalizations, deeper and more complex. And then it did something that made every hair on my body stand up. It looked directly at me and made a gesture. Its massive hand moved from its own chest, then pointed at the boy, then back to its chest. Mine. The meaning was unmistakable. "This is mine to protect." "We understand," Sarah Martinez said quietly beside me. She'd worked with gorillas during her graduate studies and recognized protective posturing when she saw it. "We just want to talk, to understand." For several minutes, we stood in tense silence. The boy continued to watch us, his body language torn between curiosity and flight instinct. The creature never took its eyes off us, ready to defend if needed. Then, slowly, surprisingly, the boy took a step forward. Just one step, but it was toward us rather than away. The creature's hand tightened briefly on his shoulder, a warning, but didn't pull him back. The boy took another step, then another, until he was perhaps 50 feet away from us. Up close, I could see details the photos hadn't captured. His eyes were dark brown, startlingly human despite everything else. His face, beneath the grime and wild hair, still held traces of the 7-year-old from the missing person photo. The scar through his left eyebrow was clearly visible. "Jeremy," I said again very softly, "do you remember that name? Do you remember your family?" The boy's expression shifted. Pain crossed his features, something deep and buried. His mouth worked, trying to form words in a language he hadn't spoken in 12 years. What came out was fractured, barely recognizable. "Jer, me." The sounds were harsh, unpracticed. "Jer, my." "Yes," I encouraged him. "Jeremy, that's your name." He touched his own chest, struggling with the concept. Then he pointed back at the creature and made a series of vocalizations. When he turned back to us, he managed one more word, clearer this time. Father. The word hung in the air like a physical thing, not the creature's name, not a description. Father, this boy, missing for 12 years, survivor of something that should have killed a 7-year-old child, had found family in the impossible, had been raised by something that wasn't supposed to exist. Lisa Chen stepped forward slowly, her movements careful and non-threatening. Jeremy, she said gently, we know your other family, your mother, your father, your sister Emily. They've been looking for you. They never stopped looking. The boy's face contorted with emotions I couldn't read. Confusion, pain, longing, and something else, fear. He took a step back, shaking his head. The creature moved closer to him, and I heard it make a sound that was unmistakably reassuring. The boy leaned into that massive frame, seeking comfort. We're going to set up camp nearby, I decided. Not too close. We're not trying to capture you, Jeremy. We're just here. When you're ready to talk more, we'll be here. Over the next 3 days, we established a careful routine. We set up camp about 200 yards from where we'd first encountered them, close enough to maintain contact, but far enough to not feel threatening. Each morning, we'd prepare extra food, simple things like trail mix and dried fruit, and leave it at the edge of our camp. Each evening, the food would be gone. Slowly, incrementally, the boy began to come closer, always with the creature nearby, always ready to bolt, but coming nonetheless. We'd talk to him, show him pictures of his family, play recordings of his mother's voice. Each time, we'd see that same conflict play across his face, the pull of old memories warring with 12 years of a different life. On the 4th day, something changed. The boy approached our camp in the early morning, the creature hanging back but watching intently. He walked right up to where I sat by the fire, and for the first time, he sat down across from me. His movements were still more animal than human, but there was intentionality to them. I held out a granola bar. He took it, sniffed it carefully, then ate it in quick, efficient bites. When he was done, he looked at me and spoke, the words still broken but more practiced than before. Why? You. Come. We've been looking for you for 12 years, I said. Your family, they want you to come home. He shook his head violently. Home. Here. He pointed at the forest, at the creature waiting in the shadows. Family. Here. You had another family once, a mother who sang to you at night, a father who taught you to fish, a little sister who looked up to you. Something in his eyes shifted, ancient memory surfacing like a fish rising from deep water. He touched his chest again, struggling. My small, scared, lost. His hand made a gesture that might have been crying. Then the gesture changed, became a sweeping motion that indicated the creature. Find me, keep, safe, teach, live. He saved you, I realized. When you were lost and alone, he found you and kept you alive. The boy nodded emphatically. Then he did something that broke my heart. He pulled aside his matted hair and showed me his neck. There was a scar there, old and faded but distinctive. Puncture marks, teeth marks, bad animal. He made a snarling gesture. Attack, small, my. He pointed at the creature again. Save, kill, bad animal. What he was describing was clear. A 7-year-old boy lost in the wilderness, attacked by a predator, probably a cougar based on the wound pattern. And a Bigfoot, for reasons we might never understand, had intervened, had saved the child. And then, instead of abandoning him, had chosen to raise him. Does he have a name? I asked, gesturing toward the creature. What do you call him? The boy made a sound, a deep, rumbling vocalization that I couldn't hope to replicate. But then he added something that sounded almost like a word. Keeper. Keeper, I repeated. He kept you safe all these years. Family, the boy said again, more firmly this time. Then he looked at me with those two old eyes and that young face. You. Take. Away? Not if you don't want us to. But Jeremy, your other family, they deserve to know you're alive. They deserve to see you, to understand what happened. You don't have to leave forever, but maybe you could visit. Let them know you're okay. The boy was quiet for a long time, processing. Then he stood abruptly and walked back to where Keeper waited. They moved off into the forest together, and I didn't know if we'd see them again. But the next morning, they both came to our camp. And for the first time, Keeper came close enough for us to truly see him. Up close, the intelligence in his eyes was unmistakable. This was no animal. This was a thinking, feeling being who had made a choice 12 years ago to save a child and had devoted every day since to that child's survival. Through gestures and Jeremy's limited vocabulary, we established a fragile communication. Yes, Jeremy could visit his human family, but he would return to the forest, to Keeper. He wasn't asking permission. He was establishing terms. This was who he was now, a bridge between two worlds, neither fully human nor fully wild, but something in between. The reunion with the Holloway family happened 3 days later at the ranger station with careful supervision. Jeremy's mother collapsed when she saw him, sobbing so hard she couldn't speak. His father stood frozen, tears streaming down his face. His sister Emily, now 19, approached slowly, carefully, as if approaching a frightened animal. "Jeremy," she whispered, "do you remember me?" The boy, who was no longer quite a boy, studied her face. Then, slowly, he smiled. It was awkward, unpracticed, but genuine. M. Lee. The name came out broken but recognizable. Small. "Sister." She started crying then, reaching out to hug him. He stiffened at the contact, unused to it, but didn't pull away. And in that moment, I saw the beginning of what would be months, years maybe, of learning to exist in both worlds. The government got involved eventually. Specialists from every field imaginable wanted to study Jeremy, to understand how a child survived 12 years in wilderness that killed experienced adults. But the Holloways, to their credit, protected him fiercely. They established terms. Jeremy would spend time with them, learning to be human again, but he would also return to the forest, to Keeper. It wasn't traditional, wasn't anything anyone had planned for, but it was the only way forward. I stayed involved with the case, visiting the Holloways every few weeks to check on Jeremy's progress. What I witnessed over those first months was remarkable and heartbreaking in equal measure. Jeremy had to relearn everything we take for granted: how to use a toilet, how to eat with utensils, how to sleep in a bed instead of on the ground. Even simple things like sitting in a chair felt wrong to him at first, but the language came back faster than anyone expected. Dr. Patricia Morehouse, the child psychologist assigned to Jeremy's case, told me it was like watching someone recover from amnesia. The neural pathways were still there, just buried under 12 years of disuse. Within 3 months, Jeremy could hold basic conversations. Within 6, he was speaking in full sentences, though his vocabulary remained limited and his grammar often fractured. What fascinated Dr. Morehouse most wasn't what Jeremy had forgotten, but what he'd learned. He could identify over 200 edible plants by sight and smell. He knew which streams were safe to drink from and which carried parasites. He could predict weather changes hours before they happened by reading cloud patterns and animal behavior. He could move through dense forest in complete silence, a skill that took military special forces years to master. And he could communicate with Keeper in ways that went beyond simple gesture or vocalization. There was a language there, rudimentary perhaps, but real, a system of sounds, movements, and what Jeremy called feeling words, concepts that didn't translate directly into English but conveyed emotion, intention, and complex ideas. I remember one afternoon in late September, sitting on the Holloway's back porch with Jeremy's father, Michael. We watched Jeremy in the backyard practicing throwing a baseball with his sister, Emily. His movements were still too fluid, too efficient. He didn't throw like a teenager who'd grown up playing Little League. He threw like someone who'd spent years learning to hurl rocks at targets for survival. "He's never going to be normal, is he?" Michael said quietly. There was no anger in his voice, just acceptance of a difficult truth. "Normal's overrated," I replied. "He's alive, Michael. Against impossible odds, he survived. That's not nothing." "I know." Michael rubbed his face, exhaustion evident in every line. His mother, she keeps thinking if we just give it more time, if we just work harder, he'll come back to us completely. But I see the way he looks at the forest, the way he paces when he's been inside too long. He's not ours anymore, not entirely. Maybe he never was just yours. Maybe that's okay. That evening, Jeremy asked if I would take him back to see Keeper. The arrangement was that he could visit once a week, always supervised, always documented. The government insisted on it. There were concerns about disease transmission, about safety, about a dozen other bureaucratic worries. But they allowed it because the alternative, trying to keep Jeremy away from Keeper completely, had resulted in 3 days of him refusing to eat, speak, or cooperate in any way. We hiked in just before sunset, Jeremy leading the way with the confidence of someone who knew every tree, every rock, every game trail. He'd been given clothes, boots, a jacket, but he shed them as we walked, leaving them in a neat pile at the forest's edge. By the time we reached the meeting place, a small clearing marked by a distinctive lightning-struck cedar, he was barefoot and shirtless, moving on all fours as often as upright. Keeper was already there, waiting. The massive creature stood when it saw us, making a low, rumbling sound that Jeremy returned. The boy ran the last 30 yards and quite literally leapt into Keeper's arms. The creature caught him easily, cradling him like the child he'd once been, making soft vocalizations that sounded remarkably like cooing. I stayed back, giving them space, but close enough to observe. What I witnessed wasn't human and wasn't quite animal either. It was something else entirely, a bond forged in survival and deepened through years of complete dependence. Keeper groomed Jeremy's hair, picking out debris and checking for ticks. Jeremy vocalized constantly, telling Keeper everything in that strange language they shared, and Keeper listened, responding with sounds and gestures that Jeremy clearly understood. After about 20 minutes, Keeper looked over at me. The creature's eyes, deep brown and remarkably human, held what I can only describe as assessment. Then it did something unexpected. It approached me, moving slowly, giving me time to react if I needed to. Jeremy walked beside it, one hand resting on Keeper's massive forearm. Keeper stopped about 10 feet away and made a sound, then looked at Jeremy expectantly. The boy turned to me. "He wants to thank you," Jeremy said, his English more practiced now, but still carrying traces of his other language in its rhythm. "For not taking me away, for understanding family is more than blood." "Tell him," I said carefully, "that I understand what he did. Saving you, raising you, keeping you alive. Tell him I know he's your father as much as Michael Holloway is." Jeremy translated, the vocalizations rising and falling in complex patterns. Keeper listened, then responded. Jeremy turned back to me. He says humans usually kill what they don't understand. He says you and your people are different. He wants to know why. I thought about that for a long moment, because some of us are learning that different doesn't mean dangerous, because Jeremy's mother's grief taught us that love isn't limited to our own species, because seeing you two together showed us that family is a choice, not just biology. Jeremy translated again. Keeper was quiet for several seconds, then made a gesture, one massive hand extended toward me, palm up. Jeremy grinned, the expression still unpracticed but genuine. He wants to shake hands. It's how you do respect, right? My heart hammering, I stepped forward and placed my hand in Keeper's palm. The creature's hand was warm, calloused, unmistakably real. We stood like that for several seconds, human and something not quite human, acknowledging each other across the vast divide of species and understanding. That handshake changed something fundamental in how the government approached the situation. I reported it, along with everything else I'd observed. The footage from our body cameras showed undeniable intelligence, showed communication, showed a relationship that was clearly reciprocal and caring. It became harder to classify Keeper as simply an unknown animal. The questions being asked in federal offices shifted from "what is it" to "who is it?" Dr. Morehouse began including sessions where Jeremy could talk about his life in the forest, not as trauma to be overcome, but as experience to be understood. She recorded hours of him describing the daily routines, the lessons Keeper taught him, the dangers they'd faced together. Bears, cougars, harsh winters where food was scarce. Jeremy had nearly died from infection twice, once from a badly cut foot, once from what sounded like appendicitis. Both times Keeper had treated him with a combination of plants and techniques that Dr. Morehouse admitted sounded remarkably sophisticated. There was structure to their days in the forest. Mornings were for foraging and hunting, teaching Jeremy to find food. Midday was for rest, for grooming, for what Jeremy called talking time, when Keeper would make elaborate vocalizations that seemed to be stories or lessons. Afternoons were for travel, for exploring territory, for checking the boundaries of what Keeper considered their range, roughly 30 square miles of some of the most remote forest in the Cascades. Evenings were for preparing sleeping areas, for eating, for the quiet companionship that families share. Keeper had taught Jeremy not just survival skills, but something deeper. Respect for the forest, for other creatures, for the balance that kept everything alive. When to take and when to leave alone. How to move through the world without destroying it. Lessons that most humans never learn. As winter approached, the question arose of what would happen during the cold months. Jeremy had always spent winters in the forest with Keeper, in carefully prepared shelters insulated with moss and bark, staying warm through shared body heat and fires that Keeper apparently knew how to maintain. The thought of letting him return to that after he'd had heated homes and regular meals horrified his mother. But Jeremy was adamant. Keeper was getting older, he explained. The creature's movements had slowed over the past year. There was gray in the russet fur. Keeper needed him, especially during the harsh months when food was scarce and temperatures dropped below zero. Jeremy's skills, learned over 12 years, made the difference between Keeper thriving and merely surviving. A compromise was reached. Jeremy would spend weekdays with his human family, attending a special education program designed for his unique situation. Weekends and school breaks, he would return to the forest to Keeper. During the deepest winter months, December through February, he would stay primarily in the forest, but check in weekly at a designated ranger station. It wasn't perfect. Nothing about the situation was perfect. But it honored both sides of Jeremy's identity, both families that claimed him. I watched him navigate this impossible balance through that fall and into winter, watched him struggle with algebra while being able to calculate angles and distances in his head for throwing stones, watched him sit uncomfortably through English class while speaking 2 languages fluently, one that no other human could understand. Watched him make tentative friendships with other teenagers who couldn't begin to comprehend the life he'd lived. And I watched him come alive every Friday afternoon when Michael would drive him to the trailhead and Jeremy would shed his human life like an uncomfortable coat, disappearing into the forest to find his other father waiting. There were difficult moments. In November, a group of cryptozoologists got wind of the story and tried to track Keeper. hoping to photograph or capture evidence. Jeremy and I found their camp and very politely but firmly explained that if they didn't leave immediately, Keeper would disappear deeper into wilderness they'd never navigate, and Jeremy would never cooperate with any authorities again. They left. Then, in December, a government agency I'd never heard of showed up. Men in suits with vague credentials, asking questions about Keeper's DNA, about the possibility of others like him, about national security implications of an unknown intelligent species on American soil. I told them everything I knew, which wasn't much, and emphasized repeatedly that Keeper had shown zero aggression toward humans, had in fact saved a human child and raised him successfully. They wanted to bring Keeper in for study. I explained, as patiently as I could, that Keeper wasn't a specimen to be collected, but a person who'd earned the right to live freely. They didn't like that answer. The conversation ended with thinly veiled threats about obstruction of federal investigations. I called Sheriff Dawson immediately after they left. He made some calls of his own to state representatives, to federal judges he'd worked with, to journalists who specialized in civil rights cases. Within 48 hours, someone higher up the chain had apparently decided that the public relations nightmare of forcibly capturing the creature that saved and raised a missing child wasn't worth whatever scientific data they hoped to gain. But I knew it wasn't over. I knew that somewhere, in some government office, there were people making plans, weighing options, deciding whether the potential benefits outweighed the risks. That knowledge sat heavy in my gut through the winter months. Christmas 1996 was surreal. The Holloways invited me to their home, along with Sheriff Dawson and Dr. Morehouse. Jeremy was there, uncomfortable in new clothes his mother had bought, fidgeting with the collar of a sweater that he clearly found restrictive. Under the Christmas tree were presents, wrapped carefully by a mother who'd spent 12 years imagining this moment. Jeremy opened them with curiosity, but little understanding of the ritual. A new winter jacket, which he examined with the practical eye of someone evaluating its warmth-to-weight ratio. Books about survival and wildlife, which he flipped through with genuine interest. And then a small package from his sister Emily. Inside was a simple compass on a leather cord. Emily had tears in her eyes when she explained, "So you can always find your way home, whichever home you need." Jeremy stared at the compass for a long moment, then did something that made everyone in the room go quiet. He stood, walked to Emily, and hugged her. It was awkward, his movement still unpracticed, but it was genuine. The first time he'd initiated physical contact with his human family. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I keep it always." But even that moment of connection was bittersweet, because the next morning Jeremy was gone. He'd left a note in his still-developing handwriting. "Gone to Keeper, back in 3 days. He is alone for Christmas, too." Michael found me at my office on December 27th. He looked like he hadn't slept, his eyes red-rimmed and haunted. "Robert, we need to talk about what happens when Keeper dies." I set down my coffee. "What do you mean?" "I mean, he's old. Jeremy says so. Says Keeper moves slower, sleeps more, sometimes forgets things. And when Keeper dies, what happens to my son? Does he stay in the forest alone? Does he try to find others like Keeper, or does he finally come home for good?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But Michael, I don't think we get to decide that. Jeremy's not 7 anymore. He's 19, legally an adult. He gets to choose his life. He's not equipped to make that choice. He missed 12 years of socialization, of education, of learning how to be human. Maybe, or maybe he learned different things that are just as valuable. Michael, I've watched him survive situations that would kill most adults. I've seen him communicate across species barriers. I've seen him show more emotional intelligence and empathy than most people twice his age. He's not broken. He's just different." Michael was quiet for a long time. Finally, he said, "His mother wants him to stay, wants him to give up the forest, go to college, have a normal life. But I see it in his eyes. The forest isn't where he lives. It's who he is, and asking him to give that up, it's like asking him to cut off a limb. So what do you want to do?" "I want to support whatever decision he makes, even if it breaks his mother's heart. Even if it means we only see him a few times a year. Because that's what loving someone means, right? Letting them be who they are, not who you need them to be." That conversation stayed with me through the winter. I increased my visits to the forest, ostensibly to check on Jeremy, but really to observe Keeper. Michael was right. The creature was aging and not well. There was a stiffness to its movements, a cloudiness in one eye that suggested developing cataracts. Keeper had probably been in its prime when it found Jeremy 12 years ago, perhaps 30 or 40 years old, if their lifespan was comparable to gorillas. That would make it somewhere between 42 and 52 now, entering old age for a creature that lived hard in harsh conditions. Jeremy knew. I could see the knowledge in how carefully he watched Keeper, how he took on more of the physical tasks, how he prepared larger stores of food. He was preparing for a future where he would need to care for Keeper the way Keeper had once cared for him. The reversal of roles that comes to all families eventually. In February, we had our first real crisis. A winter storm, one of the worst in 20 years, dumped 4 feet of snow on the mountains in 72 hours. Temperatures plunged to 15 below zero. The wind chill made it feel like 40 below, conditions that could kill even someone as experienced as Jeremy. When he didn't show up for his weekly check-in at the ranger station, I organized a search team immediately. Sarah Martinez, Tom Whitfield, and I headed out in conditions that were borderline suicidal. The snow was so deep we needed snowshoes. The wind cut through every layer of clothing. Visibility was maybe 20 feet. We found them in Keeper's winter shelter, a cave that had been carefully modified over years, perhaps decades. The entrance was small, easy to miss, but inside it opened into a space about 15 feet across. The floor was covered in layers of dried moss and pine needles. A small fire burned near the entrance, the smoke venting through a natural chimney in the rock. Keeper was lying against the back wall, wrapped in what looked like several deer hides stitched together. The creature's breathing was labored, rattling in its chest. Jeremy knelt beside it, his face etched with fear and grief. "Pneumonia," Tom Whitfield said after examining Keeper. "He's burning up with fever and that breathing. His lungs are full of fluid. Without antibiotics, without proper medical care, he's not going to make it." Jeremy looked at us with eyes that had seen too much loss already. "Can you help? Please, can you help him?" Tom and I exchanged glances. What we were considering was insane, providing medical care to an unknown species, using medications that hadn't been tested, dosages we could only guess at based on body weight and primate physiology. If Keeper died from treatment, we could be held liable. If Keeper lived and the wrong people found out, we'd have government agencies crawling all over us. But looking at Jeremy's face, at the desperation there, at Keeper struggling for each breath, there was only one choice. Tom pulled out his medical kit. "I'll need to get proper antibiotics from the hospital. This is going to take a few hours, and I can't make any promises." I radioed down to the ranger station, got Sheriff Dawson on the line, explained the situation. An hour later, a helicopter dropped a package of medical supplies at a clearing 2 miles from the cave. Strong, broad-spectrum antibiotics, IV fluids, fever reducers. Tom worked through the night, starting an IV line in Keeper's arm, a procedure made complicated by thick skin and dense muscle. He administered medications at doses we calculated based on Keeper's estimated weight of 600 pounds. Jeremy never left Keeper's side. He held the creature's massive hand, vocalized constantly in that language they shared, pressed cool, wet cloths to Keeper's forehead. At one point, Keeper's eyes opened, focused on Jeremy, and the creature made a sound so full of affection and trust that I had to turn away, my own eyes stinging. By dawn, Keeper's fever had broken. The breathing was still labored but less desperate. Tom checked vitals and allowed himself a cautious smile. "I think he's going to make it, but Jeremy, he needs to stay warm and dry for at least 2 weeks. No going out in the cold. And he needs to finish the full course of antibiotics." Jeremy nodded, understanding. "I stay. Take care of him, like he took care of me." We left them with 2 weeks of supplies, extra medication, and a radio in case of emergency. When I checked back 10 days later, Keeper was sitting up, eating solid food, the cloudiness in his eyes reduced. The creature looked at me with what I swear was gratitude, made a soft vocalization, and touched its chest, then pointed at me. Jeremy grinned. He says, "You're packed now. Family. You helped save him, so you're part of us." That moment, being accepted by a creature that represented everything science said couldn't exist, felt more significant than any award or recognition I'd ever received in my career. Spring came eventually, the way it always does, melting the snow and bringing the forest back to life. Keeper recovered fully, though the illness had aged him noticeably. Jeremy turned 20 that April, celebrated with both families. The Holloways had a cake, presents, a small party with the few friends Jeremy had made. 2 days later, I hiked into the forest and found Jeremy and Keeper having their own celebration, feasting on fresh salmon from a stream. Keeper making elaborate vocalizations that Jeremy later told me were stories from when he was small, memories of the early years after Keeper found him. Dr. Morehouse published a paper that summer, carefully anonymous, about the psychological development of a feral child reintegrated into society. It caused ripples in academic circles, debates about nature versus nurture, about the capacity for language acquisition past critical periods, about the definition of family. She never named Jeremy, never identified the location, but the implications were clear. The government agencies came back in August, different people this time from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. They wanted blood samples from Keeper, wanted to understand the creature's immune system, wanted to know if there were any zoonotic disease risks from human Sasquatch contact. I arranged a meeting with Jeremy as intermediary. The CDC scientists, 3 of them, hiked into the forest with me. They were professional, respectful, treating Keeper not as a specimen but as a patient. They explained everything through Jeremy, got what could loosely be called informed consent. Keeper allowed them to take blood samples to perform a basic physical examination, to collect hair and saliva for analysis. What they found fascinated them. Keeper's immune system was remarkably robust, with resistance to several diseases that commonly affected primates. The genetic analysis showed a species that had diverged from the human family tree approximately 6 million years ago, around the same time as gorillas. But there were unique adaptations, features that suggested a lineage that had evolved specifically for survival in North American forests. There were others, one of the scientists told me quietly. We found 3 more populations based on environmental DNA sampling, one in Northern California, one in British Columbia, one in Montana. Total population across all groups, maybe 200 individuals. They're functionally extinct from a genetic diversity standpoint. Another 2 or 3 generations, and they'll be gone. Jeremy overheard. He went very still. Gone, all of them? The scientist nodded sadly. They need a minimum viable population of at least 500 to avoid inbreeding depression. With only 200 scattered across thousands of square miles, rarely encountering each other, The species is in what we call an extinction vortex. I'm sorry. That night, Jeremy and I sat by a campfire while Keeper slept. The young man who'd been found barely a year ago, wild and wordless, now spoke with heartbreaking clarity. "Keeper saved me," Jeremy said, "gave me everything, but I can't save his people. I can't stop them from disappearing." "Maybe you already have," I said, "by showing the world they exist, by proving they're intelligent and peaceful, by making people care. The CDC is talking about habitat protection now, about connecting the populations, about conservation efforts. None of that would have happened without you. Is not enough." No, it's probably not, but it's something. And sometimes something is all we get. Jeremy was quiet for a long time, staring into the flames. Then he said, "I'm going to find them, the other groups. I'm going to travel, try to bring them together. Maybe if I can connect them, help them find each other, maybe there's a chance." That's thousands of miles of wilderness, Jeremy. Years of searching, I know. But what else can I do? Keeper gave me life, gave me family. This is how I pay that debt, by trying to save his people, even if it's probably too late. The determination in his voice reminded me of the 7-year-old boy who'd survived alone in the wilderness, who'd learned a new language, who'd adapted to an impossible situation. Jeremy might have been raised by a Sasquatch, but he'd inherited human stubbornness and hope in equal measure. That fall, Jeremy started planning his journey. He spent weeks with maps, with the CDC scientists who shared their data on the other populations, with wilderness experts who could advise on the safest routes. The Holloways were devastated. His mother begged him to stay, to give up this impossible quest. His father understood, but grieved nonetheless. Emily made him promise to write, even though they all knew communication would be sporadic at best. Dr. Morehouse tried to counsel him about the psychological risks of such isolation, of the likelihood of failure, of what it would mean to dedicate his life to a probably futile cause. Jeremy listened politely and continued preparing. Keeper seemed to understand what Jeremy intended. The creature grew more affectionate, spending long hours grooming Jeremy's hair, making soft vocalizations, touching foreheads in what appeared to be their version of a kiss. One evening, I watched Keeper draw in the dirt, creating what looked like a map. The creature pointed to different locations, made specific vocalizations. Jeremy listened intently, asking questions in their shared language. "He's telling me about the old routes," Jeremy explained later. "Paths his people used to travel between groups, back when there were more of them. Some go through mountains, some along river valleys. Keeper traveled them when he was young, before humans built roads and cut forests. He's giving me directions." That image, an ancient creature passing down generations of knowledge to a human he'd raised as his own, trying to save his species through the only bridge between their worlds, haunted me for weeks. Jeremy left in October 1997, just over a year after we'd found him. His human family gathered at the trailhead to say goodbye. His mother couldn't stop crying. His father shook his hand, then pulled him into a fierce hug. Emily gave him a small waterproof journal. "Write everything down," she said, "so someday people will know what you tried to do." I was there too, along with Sheriff Dawson, Dr. Morehouse, and a few others who'd become part of Jeremy's strange extended family. We watched him shoulder his pack, filled with supplies and survival gear, and turn toward the forest. But he wasn't alone. Keeper was going with him, at least for the first leg of the journey. The old creature stood beside Jeremy, one massive hand resting on the young man's shoulder. They'd travel together as far as Keeper's strength would allow, then Jeremy would continue alone. Before they left, Jeremy turned back to us one more time. "Thank you," he said, "for not making me choose, for letting me be both, human and wild, civilized and forest, son to two fathers. You gave me that gift." Then he and Keeper walked into the trees and disappeared. I received letters occasionally over the next few years, brief notes delivered to the ranger station by hikers who'd encountered Jeremy in the wilderness, who'd been asked to carry messages out. The handwriting improved slowly, the vocabulary expanded, but the content was always similar. Still searching, found signs of the California group. Keeper is well, will write when we can. Then in spring of 1999, a longer letter arrived. Keeper had died in January, Jeremy wrote, peacefully in his sleep, in a shelter they'd built together in the mountains of Northern California. Jeremy had buried him according to what he thought were Sasquatch traditions, covering the grave with stones, leaving offerings of food and flowers. He'd stayed with the grave for a week, grieving alone in the wilderness. "I cried for my father," Jeremy wrote, "both of them, the one who gave me life and the one who saved it. Keeper taught me that family isn't about who makes you, but who chooses to love you. He chose me when he could have left me to die. I will spend my life honoring that choice." The letter continued with news that Jeremy had made contact with the California group, 5 individuals living in the remote Trinity Alps. They'd been wary at first, but Jeremy's ability to communicate, his knowledge of Sasquatch customs and language learned from Keeper, had eventually won their trust. He was learning variations in their dialect, documenting differences in behavior and culture between groups. "I'm keeping records," he wrote. "Everything Keeper taught me, everything I'm learning from the others. Someday, even if they're all gone, their knowledge will survive. Their story will be told." The letters came less frequently after that. One in 2000, one in 2001. Jeremy had reached the British Columbia group, 11 individuals. He'd found evidence of the Montana group, but hadn't made contact yet. The work was slow, dangerous, often discouraging, but he continued. "The last letter I received was in 2003, 7 years after we'd found him." Jeremy was 26 years old, had spent a third of his life in the wilderness by that point. He wrote that he'd succeeded in connecting 2 of the groups, arranging a meeting between the California and British Columbia Sasquatch in a remote valley in Oregon. 3 individuals from each group had made the journey, the first contact between separate populations in over 30 years. They recognized each other, Jeremy wrote, not individuals, but as family. They had different vocalizations for some concepts, different traditions, but the core language was the same. And when they saw each other, really saw each other, they cried. I watched these ancient, powerful beings weep with joy at finding they weren't as alone as they thought. 2 of them mated, he continued, a male from California and a female from British Columbia. If they have offspring, if this child carries genes from both populations, it's the first genetic mixing in decades. Maybe it's not enough. Maybe 200 individuals scattered across thousands of miles is still too few. But it's a chance. It's hope. The letter ended with words that I've read 100 times since, that I've memorized, that represent everything Jeremy became. Keeper saved one lost child. I'm trying to save his children. Maybe I'll fail. Probably I will. But I have to try, because that's what family does. We show up. We fight for each other. We try to make things better even when the odds are impossible. Keeper taught me that. Both my fathers did. I haven't heard from Jeremy in over 20 years now. He'd be 47, the same age I am as I tell this story. I don't know if he's still out there, still working to connect the scattered Sasquatch populations, still honoring Keeper's memory by trying to save his species. I don't know if he's succeeded or failed, if the Sasquatch still exist or have slipped quietly into extinction while the world looked away. But I know this, a 7-year-old boy lost and terrified, was found by something that shouldn't exist and was loved so completely that it changed him forever. He became a bridge between worlds, between species, between the wild and the civilized. And when that impossible father died, the boy spent his life trying to repay the gift of love and survival he'd been given. The government still has files on Jeremy Holloway, on Keeper, on the Sasquatch populations. Classified documents with redacted sections, scientific studies that will never be published, debates about whether to reveal the truth or maintain the secret. They ask me sometimes when agents come around every few years whether I think the world should know. I tell them the same thing every time. The world doesn't get to know until the Sasquatch are safe, until there are enough of them in protected enough habitat that revelation won't lead to extinction. Jeremy understood that. He kept the secret while working to fix the problem. That's what real conservation looks like. Not publicity and awareness campaigns, but quiet, determined work in the shadows. Protecting what needs protecting until it's strong enough to stand revealed. I'm retiring next month, 47 years old, 23 years with search and rescue, and I've never found anything as important as what I found in July of 1996. They're giving me a plaque, probably a nice dinner, but what I'll remember is a wild boy who'd learned to love the impossible and the creature who taught him how. Sometimes late at night, I drive out to the trailhead where Jeremy and Keeper walked into the forest for the last time. I sit there in my truck, looking at those dark trees, and I wonder if Jeremy's still out there. I wonder if he found all the groups, connected them, gave them a fighting chance. I wonder if there are Sasquatch children being born right now who exist because one human refused to give up on his father's people. I wonder if love can really save a species, if one person's determination can change the trajectory of extinction, if a bond between human and Sasquatch can ripple forward through generations. I don't have answers, I just have faith. Faith that somewhere in those mountains, in forests so deep and wild that humans rarely venture there, Jeremy Holloway is still keeping his promise, still honoring Keeper's memory, still being the son that two fathers, human and Sasquatch, raised him to be. And maybe that's enough. Maybe doing the work, keeping the faith, fighting for what you love even when victory is uncertain, maybe that's what family means. What being human means, what Keeper understood when he saved a lost child instead of leaving him to die. There's one more thing I need to tell you before this story ends. Something that happened 3 years ago that changed everything I thought I knew about how Jeremy's story concluded. It was October 2020. I was 44 years old, 3 years from retirement, working a routine missing hiker case near Mount Rainier. A college student had wandered off trail and gotten turned around. We found her within 6 hours, dehydrated but fine. Standard operation. But as we were hiking back out, Sarah Martinez, still on my team after all these years, grabbed my arm and pointed into the trees. There were footprints, large ones, the distinctive pattern we'd learned to recognize 24 years earlier. But these weren't alone. Beside them were smaller prints, child-sized, and the gait pattern showed someone walking upright, mimicking the larger stride. We followed them for maybe half a mile before we heard voices. Not English, not quite the Sasquatch vocalizations Jeremy had taught us to recognize. Something in between, a hybrid language mixing human phonemes with the rumbling, clicking sounds of Keeper's people. In a small clearing we found them. 3 Sasquatch, 2 adults and 1 juvenile, maybe 8 or 9 years old. And with them, teaching the young one how to identify edible mushrooms, was a man in his mid-40s with graying hair tied back, wearing handmade clothing that looked like a combination of modern fabric and animal hide. Jeremy saw us before we could retreat. For a moment, he froze. Then his face broke into a smile that made him look exactly like the 7-year-old boy from the missing person photo all those years ago. "Robert," he called out, his voice deeper than I remembered, but unmistakably his. "Robert Chen. I knew you'd still be working these mountains." We approached slowly, carefully. The adult Sasquatch tensed but didn't flee. One of them, a female with lighter reddish fur, moved protectively toward the juvenile. Jeremy placed a calming hand on her arm and spoke in that hybrid language. She relaxed slightly but kept watching us. "Jeremy," I managed to say. "We hoped, but it's been 17 years. He laughed, and the sound was pure joy. "I've been busy. Come, sit. I have so much to tell you." We sat in that clearing for 3 hours while Jeremy told us what had happened in the years since his last letter. He'd found the Montana group in 2004. He'd spent 6 years living with them, learning their variations of the language, documenting their culture. He'd arranged meetings between all 4 groups over the course of a decade, creating what he called The Gathering, an annual event where Sasquatch from different populations would come together in a secret location deep in the wilderness. The population had grown, Jeremy told us, his eyes bright with pride. Slowly, carefully, but it had grown. There were maybe 280 individuals now, up from 200 when we'd started. Genetic diversity was improving. Young were being born healthier, living longer. And then he introduced us to the reason for that success. The female Sasquatch, the one who'd been so protective of the juvenile, came closer. Jeremy placed his hand on her arm with obvious affection. "This is Mira," he said, using the English approximation of a name that sounded like wind through trees. "She's from the British Columbia group. And this," he gestured to the juvenile, "is our daughter. We named her Keeper's Hope. Hope for short." I stared at the child. She had her mother's reddish fur, but lighter, almost auburn, and her eyes, deep brown and intelligent, were unmistakably Jeremy's eyes. She watched us with curiosity tempered by caution, exactly the way Jeremy had watched us when we first found him. "You," Sarah Martinez breathed, "you and she, you have a child together." "3 children," Jeremy corrected gently. "Hope is the oldest. Her brother Oak is with the California group right now, learning their traditions. And our youngest, Dawn, is only 2. She's back at our main camp with Mira's sister." The implications crashed over me like a wave. Jeremy hadn't just been working to save the Sasquatch. He'd become one of them, had taken a mate, started a family, created a bridge not just culturally but genetically between human and Sasquatch. "Is that even possible?" I asked. "I mean, biologically? We share 98% of our DNA," Jeremy said. "Same as humans and chimpanzees. But Sasquatch are closer to us than chimps are." Keeper knew that somehow. He used to tell me stories about the old days, hundreds of years ago, when his people and mine would sometimes share territories, even families. The children were rare, but they existed. "I'm not the first human raised by Sasquatch, Robert. I'm just the first one you know about. And my children aren't the first hybrid offspring. They're just the first in a very long time." He explained that the hybrid children were thriving, showing traits of both species. They were stronger than human children, more adaptable than pure Sasquatch. They could speak both languages fluently, move between both worlds in ways neither parent species could. They represented a new possibility, a literal genetic bridge between the populations. "There are 6 hybrid children now," Jeremy said. 3 of mine, 2 from a union between a human researcher who joined us 5 years ago and a male from the Montana group, and 1 from, well, the circumstances are complicated, but there's a woman who was lost in the wilderness as a teenager and found by the California group. She chose to stay. So there are others," Sarah said. "Other humans who know the truth. 17 of us now. People who've been rescued by Sasquatch. or who stumbled upon them and chose to help rather than exploit. We're called the speakers. We live between both worlds, helping to connect, to translate, to protect, and we're teaching our children to do the same. Jeremy walked us through the forest to a hidden valley I'd never known existed despite decades of working these mountains. There, we found a community that seemed impossible. Sasquatch living in carefully constructed shelters alongside humans in weatherproof tents. Children, both human and hybrid, and Sasquatch playing together in a clearing. Fires burning, food being prepared, the sounds of laughter and conversation in multiple languages blending together. An elderly Sasquatch, massive and silver-furred, approached Jeremy and made a complex series of vocalizations. Jeremy responded fluently, then turned to translate. This is Silver Cloud. He's the eldest of the Montana group, probably 75 years old. He says, I should bring you to the memory stones. He says, it's time humans understood